Ladies, gentlemen, everyone in between, welcome to Cromulent Wrestling. Here today for a very special episode, the first AEW video on the channel. I'm here by myself today to predict AEW Revolution 2025. So, for those of you who know me, welcome back. Good to have you. For those who don't, my name is George. I'm here on Cromulent Wrestling. I'm here every week discussing Rev Pro with my good friend, Mr. Dave the Mark, for the This Is a Revolution podcast. If you like Rev Pro, go and check it out. We've got 42 episodes up there and some great stuff, some event coverage. We are here each and every week discussing the events, discussing things we want to happen, and interviewing some of the great people that have been part of Rev Pro, including the now, unfortunately, former AEW wrestler Zach Knight, and also with independent wrestling phenomenon GCW's own, and now RevPro's own, one called Manders. If you'd like to learn a bit more about what we do here, please come and check us out every week. For those of you who have just found me based off the AEW podcast, well, let me fill you in a little bit. So, this channel was originally going to be AEW focused with a bit of Rev Pro on the side. Rev Pro is a promotion I love. If you've watched AEW, you've probably heard Rev Pro mentioned at some point, whether that is just mention it in video packages, Will Ospreay mention it, or the CEO carrying those titles, the Rev Pro Undisputed British Women's Championship. There's a lot been going on, a lot of links between AEW and Rev Pro over the years. So if you have heard about Rev Pro and want to get involved, this is the channel for you. But now, I'm here today because I've been contemplating for a while about doing something AEW related. But as I mentioned at the start, this was going to be an AEW podcast. But at some point over the last year or so, AEW just, I don't know, they just weren't must see to me anymore. And that's sad because it's the style of wrestling that I love. It's a bit of everything, and it just wasn't clicking for me. I don't know why. I couldn't put my finger on it for you, but something just wasn't gelling. And sad to say that since All In London, which was phenomenal, I was there live for that. It was so good, but I've not been consistent with AEW. But every now and again, I do check in and see little bits about what's happening. So catching a debut here or catching a great promo here, a great match here. So I'm not fully out of the loop. And I've been watching a bit more intently as I've been seeing this card grow for Revolution. And man, it's looking good. It is looking so good. And in a lot of ways, it really feels like a classic AEW booked pay-per-view. So, for me, this is a chance to just jump back on board and start talking about AEW because I love the product when it hits on all cylinders. I'm really hoping this is the event that just draws me back in and gets us on the road to me just wanting to watch it all the time. So, without further ado, I'm going to run down the 9-match card. Now, some of you might be saying, what about the pre-show? 0 hour. Hey, look, I'm not here for that. I'm not here to waste your time. We all know who's going to win those matches. And let's be honest, we are here for this stellar 9-match card that's actually going to be on pay-per-view. So, we are going to go through these matches one by one. I'm going to give you my thoughts. I'm going to maybe predict who I think will win. I'm going to give you some more thoughts at the end. But please, if you do like what you see from me here, like, share, subscribe. I'd really love to get this channel's YouTube subscriber numbers up. If this goes well and people are reacting to it and like it, and AEW draw me back in, I will be here a bit more regularly to talk about it. And I might bring some friends along once or twice along the road as well. So please just do everything you can to share this. This is me, a guy who just loves wrestling and wants to reach as many people as possible to talk about it with. So, first match. What have I got on my list? Oh, okay. Steel cage match. Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher. So, this has a lot of things and a lot of thoughts that I've got going into it. First of all, we know the match is going to be incredible. The chemistry that these lads have is insane, right? Will Ospreay's vein of form at the moment, I really don't know who is more consistent at such a high level. Like, there is a level that you kind of have to get to be able to hit these at least 4.5 star matches. And look, I know that some people roll their eyes when I say that. I don't necessarily mean to melt the scale, but I just know for whatever it is, the perceived, hey, this 4-star, very, very good, great match. The guys having them on the regular, whether it's in tag team matches, whether it's part of 6-man tag matches, whether it's singles matches, I've seen it myself multiple times across the globe. Whether it's in London, whether it's he's doing stuff in America, whether it's little old Southampton that I've seen them put at one point the best live wrestling match I'd ever seen in my life in a club venue that could maybe at that point probably held about 150, 200 people. The guy has got an insane level of consistency and quality every time he steps in the ring. As does Kyle Fletcher. One of the things I really love is this year has been a real coming out party for Kyle Fletcher and a strong push behind him. But it's also been done in a way that hasn't felt like he's just been gone, right, here you go, he's now this level. And kind of the level I'm thinking that, and I know he gets this comparison a lot, but he's Randy Orton in 2004 after he leaves Evolution, right? He's got a level within the group. He's won the world title. He gets turned on very quickly, but it's like, no, this guy's a top guy now. And that felt a little contrived at the time. And we've seen examples of that over time as well. Kyle Fletcher, it doesn't feel like that's happening with him. It really feels like there's been this long, sustained push and matches that get him there. His Continental Classic run, fantastic. His matches with Will have been great. While they were rated much higher than I probably would have rated them, they were still very, very good, great matches. So these two have got great chemistry, and while I'm sad that it probably means no Aussie Open, and I really want to see Aussie Open as a team in AEW for a while, it's probably going to lead to more single stuff for Kyle, which I can't be too sad at. The guy is great at what he does, and he's really sort of blossoming in front of our eyes. The story in the match. So we're now kind of getting to the stage where, first of all, long-term storytelling. One of the things I have been hearing a lot lately is that AEW is not very good at long-term storytelling at the minute, and things are getting dropped. And look, maybe that is happening on occasions, but one of the strengths of the AEW product I've always felt has been its ability to have long-term storytelling. And look, there's two forms of long-term storytelling, okay? There's long-term storytelling, which is planned, and we are going from point A to point B, and these are all the points we're hitting along the way. And sometimes there's leaving breadcrumbs, and you'll hear me talk about this a lot with Dave on This Is a Revolution for our RevPro podcast, but sometimes the booker will just put out 4 or 5 little breadcrumbs that if we want to down the line, we can come back and revisit. And I think when it comes to long-term booking, there's somewhere in between the two, right? Like, you can't always plan everything, but by booking things well and having them make sense over time, you can then start to revisit things to build layers upon the story. And I think this is something they've done really well here. Overall, though, I think it's time for this story to end. It has been going on a very long time. And this is when it comes to long-term storytelling, there needs to be a definitive endpoint. And also, I found sadly, the Don Callis family element I have found to be a little lacking. It's really sad. Don Callis is a guy who can talk well, who can perform well, and can have some good guys around him. And it almost felt a little bit like AEW's attempt at having like a Paul Heyman kind of talker, despised figure that could bring people up around him. And I don't think it's quite worked in the way they were hoping to get some of these lads up, but it has done a really, really great job in having Kyle Fletcher be pushed up the card. I know Takeshita is out there with the International Championship at the moment, and I kind of feel that Takeshita would have started to do that anyway. And I actually think at one point turning him heel and putting him with Don Callis, I think probably suffered the trajectory a little bit. But Kyle, no. Kyle is the unmitigated winner of this, and having real life friend Will Ospreay like put him over in some great matches has been it's been great for him. But we're now at the stage where we have a steel cage match between the two. So you've got to think this is the end. I really love how steel cage matches has almost become AEW's thing, right? Like their definitive end point. It's one of those things in wrestling that kind of become very overused and never used for a while after that. And AEW's done a really great job. So Cody and Wardlow is one example that I could give of a great one. And there's been some others down the line. There's been sometimes things have gone on steel cage matches that haven't paid off. But what I'm really interested on this one is how these guys use the environment. These are two guys that can do a lot. But this is also Will Ospreay, who admittedly cannot do some of the stuff that he used to be able to do. But they are both very clever lads. So Will might physically not be able to do some of the stuff that he's done before. Maybe he can just bust some of it out and he just hasn't done before because he's picking his spots a little bit more as well. So I'm really interested to see how these guys use that environment of a steel cage, which really is just a cage around the ring. I think they can use it in unique ways, and I think this is going to be a fantastic match. I think this will be the best match they've had, and I think Will Ospreay comes out on top, and I think Will Ospreay should come out on top. We're at a stage now where Will has been very giving to people. He's helped get people over, and I think it's been really smart in some ways as well, because you can't have Will constantly win everything, because people will start to go, he's over pushed, he's getting everything handed to him. We've seen how fans can reject people, and at this stage you don't want to have to turn Will heel because the crowd are turning him heel. I think WWE has shown really well how you can get a guy who is just an all-out babyface like Cody over to a degree where people are cheering him all the time and want to see him. And I see Will in a very similar vein. Will to take the win here, then I think he needs to move on to something else. What that something else is yet, I don't know. And I don't have any inklings as what that could be, because my initial thought would be something to do with Okada and Kenny. But I think that they're going against each other at All In Texas. And I think now might not be the time to do that feud. I know we've had Okada versus Will in AEW. Do we want to go back to that so soon? I'm not quite so sure. It would be a great match, but maybe depending on how the end of the night goes, I think that could open up some avenues for Will Ospreay. Now, next match on the card. So this is one of those matches that, you know, it's a really, really tenuous way that this match has ended up on the card. So there's not a huge amount to say. That yes, we've had Okada versus Buddy Matthews out in Australia. We had a little bit of backstage altercations between the two, but it's not one that's got a huge amount of story going into it, let's be honest. However, I think that's okay, because we've got a lot of matches on this card that have got that big story in. And when it comes to matches and story, I kind of see AEW in some ways as a big indie. Now, I know that I'll get a lot of people saying, well, that's actually used to like denigrate AEW, and I get that. But what I mean is AEW, like at its core, is like that's what it is about. It was the indie ethos that brought it. And yes, we need to be a professional company, and it needs to be big, and it needs to be able to do the grand storytelling that WWE does. I get that. What I think can work perfect on these is if you're doing a 9-match card and you have 7 matches being really like good story driven matches. Whether you like the story or not is another thing, and that's also key to know. But story driven matches to get us to where we are, and then have a couple of matches that got really tenuous links, or even maybe just no links whatsoever, and go, here is a great match. That's fine. That's what I'm seeing like a lot of indie cards do as well. Like they will have these, they'll announce a match and just go, here you go, here's a great match for you. I think that's a really safe space for AEW to be in, and makes it feel like, I don't want to use the term, but I'm going to use it, restore the feeling. Like AEW have said that, restore the feeling. This kind of does do that a bit. Do I think Okada is going to lose? No. Fairly predictable match, I believe. Brody King's going to lose, but I think it is going to be a fantastic match nonetheless. MJF versus Hangman Adam Page. So, this is an interesting one. I feel like this is just the start of the story. And again, this is a really hard one for me to call. You've got Hangman, who's been on such a dark arc with the Swerve Strickland stuff. Really kind of changed who he was. And it was really smart because it was a good way of keeping him away from necessarily wanting the world title and actually giving him another focus. As we moved into the new year, he had a fantastic death match with Christopher Daniels. And what I loved about that was it started bringing out more character beats in him. And he was already a very complex character, but maybe should I say new, or you could say newer but older character beats being re-examined about who Hangman is. He's the main character of AEW, and I've noticed people saying that more and more in interviews and stuff like that. He is the main character, and that's true. Hangman is the main character if you want to look at it that way, and I think he's kind of for a while felt a bit lost. He's had those bits with Swerve Strickland, but outside of that, there has been some feelings of, okay, well, what's the next payoff now? We all knew that he would eventually start coming around a bit, and I think that's what we're starting to get to now. I think we're starting to get to that stage where I don't think Hangman's ever going to be the happy-go-lucky guy he was. I think he's going to be somewhere between his now more dark persona and that guy. There's going to be a bit more seriousness to him, I think. And I know that Hangman was always quite a serious character, but could have those comedic moments when he wanted to. But I think you're going to see that bit more of an edge to him. A more mature Hangman in certain ways. MJF, of course, is the devil on the shoulder, right? That's who he is. He's the devil on the shoulder who is goading you to do bad things. But by the same token, he's also the mirror reflecting to you what you don't want to hear sometimes. And maybe taking it a little bit too far. These guys are going to have a great match. I've no doubt about it. And for me, I think the winner is going to be Hangman Page. And I think the winner should be Hangman Page. I think normally with these sorts of things where, again, you're having someone was pushing the boulder up the hill to eventually get to the climax, it would be tempting to have him lose and overcome adversity again. But I feel that for the Hangman character, the overcoming adversity is recognizing who he is now and recognizing the good in him. I think that's the adversity that he's got going for him. I think this story should continue afterwards, and where I'd like to see this go is I'd like to see this go somewhere with Swerve. I think you could have him be involved somehow and find a way, and I don't know how they do it, but find a way that feels natural for the characters to almost come to some sort of reconciliation. I think this could be an interesting story, and I expect this one to go on a fair few months, and I'm here for that. Tag team title match. Okay, so I'm a huge tag team wrestling fan. Always have been. It's one of the first things I gravitated to when I was a kid. My favourite wrestlers were Hulk Hogan and the Rockers when I was about 6, 7. So I've always been a tag wrestling kid. And one of the things I loved about AEW was how deep the tag team roster was. Ever since the trios belts were introduced, the tag team roster has not been good at all. It has felt like an afterthought. It's felt like the divisions are not clearly defined, and it felt like some bleed over from one into another. So it was great for guys like tag teams like FTR, for instance, are a good one. The Young Bucks are another one where you could move them out while nothing's going on. You can move them in there, and I agree with that. I think that is a really great use. Circle your tag teams around, cycle them in, cycle them out. But the division as a whole did not feel strong enough, and it hasn't felt strong enough for a while. For me, that was also capped off by Private Party. I know a lot of people love them, and I really liked them when they first came into AEW, but to be at the stage they were, where they hadn't felt like they progressed since that initial debut, and they hadn't, when they got the titles, they hadn't been booked, really for me, believably up to that point to be champions, or since. It was very much a placeholder championship reign. Whether you want to look at it that it was always intended to be that for the Hurt Syndicate to then take the titles, or whether it was this is just how it's happened and we'll listen to the crowd. The reaction the Hurt Syndicate got when they've debuted has been great. Like, people are into them, and I think there's a couple of reasons. One, they can see how great these guys are, right? They have a lot to offer, despite the fact that they're both pushing 50, right? They both are in great shape, both physically and in the ring. They're putting on really fun matches. I love when I say big guy, little guy, that sounds so strange because Shelton Benjamin is physically a big guy, but compared to the really tall, muscular man mountain that Bobby Lashley is, they've got a bit more of a more nimble, bigger guy dynamic going on. That creates some really interesting matches. The crowd have been into them ever since they've come around. Like, the rumor is that Tony Khan switched the titles because of how much people were into them. And when they got the titles, it felt like a real shot in the arm for the division. This is not your typical kind of team in AEW. But they've got themselves over really quickly. So that's the first part. And it kind of goes over to the Outrunners. Now, the Outrunners, from what I've seen of them, they're not for me. Sometimes with humour in wrestling, I like everything. I like a bit of everything. But sometimes with humour in wrestling, it can be overdone. And I think this was one of my biggest complaints for a while, was there was a lot of humour going on in top level storylines or top division storylines. Again, I'm fine with. When humour is used in the top of divisions, I like it when it's done in a way that if it's the top of your top in that division, that it's done in a way that when it comes to match time, it feels serious. Kurt Angle, 2000, 2001 WWF epitomizes that for me. Eddie Guerrero to a degree as well. And I felt that at the time it was the Outrunners with the comedic stuff, the Harley Cameron comedic stuff, the Adam stuff all the time from Roderick Strong. And there was more. They're just the examples I'm getting now. Like I said, I can have fun. I can deal with fun. God, yeah, I really sound fun now, don't I? I can have fun. I can enjoy fun things. But I think it all came at a time where everything felt like it was just trying to be funny. And so the Outrunners never really clicked for me. And sometimes when funny happens, it does eventually click for me. Tony Storm was one of those things that at the start it didn't. Because I always like to have the in-ring back up the funny. Right? That's really important for me, is that whatever they are doing character-wise, it's in service of the story and what they're doing in the ring. And yeah, so that was a bit of a thing for me. But it's also important for me to note that these guys were super popular. And while I don't see as much now on social media, when the names do get mentioned, people are still digging it. People are still into it. So why not do something a bit different, right? Give them the tag title shot. Because otherwise, who are we putting in this spot? Like, give them the shot on pay-per-view. People are liking both teams. Let's put them together and see if they can hang. Because all it takes is for people like me to be in that position of, I'm not sure. And then they go out and they have that match. It clicks. It doesn't need to be a 5-star classic. It just needs to be good. That's really kind of my good and keeping me intrigued. And if these guys can do that, then I'll be happy. So I'm happy the match is there. I think it's a really smart move. And I hope it's the start of a real reinvigoration of the tag team division. That's what I want for AEW. Winners. Who do I think will win this match? Well, the Hurt Syndicate for me. I think it's a while before they lose these belts. And I think it should be a while. I think there's a lot of really interesting options styles-wise that you can do here as well for these guys. So just keep it rolling. While the crowd are into it, keep it rolling. When that crowd starts to wane a little bit, switch it out. Give that switch. Maybe just make it a bit of a shock, surprise switch. Like, everyone knew that these guys were winning belts. When that match got made, everyone knew it. So let's just go against the grain a little bit for when it actually comes to them losing the belts. So I said earlier about having those really tenuous, sometimes almost indie style dream matches, and this is it, right? This is the sort of match I mean. And when I say tenuous, I mean it was really tenuous at Wrestle Kingdom. No, sorry, not Wrestle Kingdom, Wrestle Dynasty, as part of the AEW weekend there with New Japan. They had a tournament that Momo Watanabe won, and she was allowed to go after any belt in AEW, CMLL, Stardom, and she wanted to go up against Mercedes Moné. These two have insane chemistry. They had a match, I believe it was at Capital Carnage 2024. Just a fantastic, fantastic match. Momo is great. Mercedes is great. Like, she has been on a vein of form that, again, few can argue with. And I think really it only comes up when I see the tribalists or people that just, for whatever reason, don't gel with what their perception of Mercedes the person is. And cool, like if that's you, cool. I don't want that tribalism, that venom around here. I'll judge these guys on the match that they're going to put out, and I think it's going to be a really, really great match. It will be interesting to me to see what's next for the TBS title. Are we going to eventually have Mercedes move into the world title picture? Is she going to carry on with the TBS title and do some more stuff? Go and have these dream matches with people around the world. One of the things that I think is really good about this is that she is helping lift the mid card. Because, yes, you can say, well, this is not someone in AEW, this is someone coming in. But having those feuds with those people within the mid card of the women, and having this as well. And what this allows for a big match that people are going to get invested in and go, I didn't know this was what women's wrestling was. Because sadly, there are still people that treat women's wrestling like a genre, and it's not. Women's wrestling is wrestling. But it's also important to get eyes on it in the same way that Sasha Banks versus Bayley at Brooklyn Takeover got eyes on wrestling, women's wrestling in a way that it never did before, changed perceptions. This will help do that as well. Along with the other women's match that's here, it will kind of show you what a pure entertainment, that's not fair to the other match, but real entertainment spectacle kind of women's match can be, and then what a pure work rate match can be as well. Mercedes is going to win this. What happens going forward, I don't know. Again, it's interesting to me the ways they can go through. Mercedes is in as big a demand as she has been in a long time. She's now the Rev Pro Women's Champion. She is going to be coming over to the UK Easter Sunday against Kanji, I hope. That's my hope. I was saying that's who she's against. It hasn't even been announced who she's against yet. That's just the direction I think they're going with, and it's going to be a phenomenal match if they do. But she is over for that event. High stakes at the Doncaster Dome, revolutionprowrestling.com for tickets if you're in the UK and fancy that. But she's going around, she's doing all these things. She's NJWP. God, I'm getting my words mixed up today. NJPW Strong Women's Champion, the Rev Pro Women's Champion, 2 belts. If you ever want to know what that's about, just ask me. And yeah, so she is in demand. She's putting on great matches. She's finding her groove as a character as well. The CEO is becoming more and more natural day by day, it seems, as well. Great stuff. Happy with this. This is going to be one of the ones that I'm going to be making sure I watch and don't want to have spoiled as to like gifts and stuff like that. Mercedes to win. Now on to what I think has the potential to be the show-stealing match of the weekend, which is crazy to say because you've got Will Ospreay and Carl Fletcher, a match that has got people who are fantastic in the ring, who have leveled up, and who have strong story behind it. You've got Mariah and Toni Storm, same. You've got Kenny Omega versus Takeshita, same. Right? These are the things that you can apply to all of them. But these guys really feel like they're on a stage where they're growing at a rapid rate. Like what we're seeing unfurl in front of us with Swerve, but also Ricochet is incredible. Now, when Ricochet came in, we had that great Wrestle Dream match, the triple threat, and I kind of thought that's Ricochet's spot, okay? And that's because I didn't see like the performance skills in him. Now, don't get me wrong, I never thought he was terrible, okay? But I never thought I saw the skills in him that would take him up to that next level. That's also how I felt about Swerve in AEW. I feel like Swerve, and this is pre-hit row Swerve, I should add. I never felt Swerve was given a chance to show his personality. And in fact, I remember when I first saw him and the wife and I were talking about it, and we said, we like this guy in the ring, but he's a bit boring, which is a real strong take to use against Swerve, because since coming to AEW, he's been unleashed. He's allowed to be himself. He's allowed to show himself, and he's grown. The Swerve that debuted at Revolution, 3 years ago, is a guy that is now been AEW World Champion. He's been Tag Team Champion. He is challenging Ricochet in a match to determine the number one contender for the AEW Championship. He walked into Wembley Stadium in the main event as AEW World Champion. Like, this guy has done things that, look, I expected big things for him when he came to AEW. I thought he'd do well. If you told me all of those things, I'd have been like, nah, it's not happening. And look, this is a guy who has been given opportunities by Toni, and then he's earned the following opportunities because he's gone out there and he smashed it. He smashed it. He smashed it. This is not the same Swerve who was teaming with Keith Lee as Swerve in Our Glory. A Swerve who, when they originally split up, we probably thought was going to take the loss because Keith was the one that we probably thought would get the bigger initial push. It's really interesting to see the dynamic. And Ricochet coming in, I think, is going to equal that. And maybe, I don't know about the Wembley Stadium, but he's already had Tokyo Dome main event against Zack Sabre Jr. His transition into this real cocky, self-assured guy who he's really not afraid to make himself look like a bit of a dweeb, right? Like, he's not afraid to make himself look a little bit I can't quite put my finger on it, but he's that guy that you want to punch and you think you probably could punch and get away with. But Ricochet's the guy that will come back after you at times. He's got this really menacing way of dealing with the whole thing with Prince Nana with the robe. And this is what I'm talking about with the story. Like, they've got the story about these guys anyway, and feeling like he's in his shadow, and then the robe added that extra element to it as well. This really does feel like a proper blood feud, and it's hard for wrestlers to get that really top level feud sometimes and make it feel like it's, like a definitive one for them. When I think of people in other promotions and go, who are their definitive wrestling partners? What are the matches and the feuds that would make me think, yeah, these your Benoits and Angles and stuff like that. You'd probably use Stone Cold and The Rock and people like that. And look, some people will scoff at me saying that. I'm just using it comparatively, of course. But I think Hangman and Swerve had that. And I think we're now seeing it with Ricochet and Swerve. Ricochet's metamorphosis is doing so much for him, because what it's doing is it's showing people he can talk, he can entertain. You give him the right way of doing it, and he will do it. He will achieve it. I've no problem now a Ricochet promo is on, thinking this guy is gonna nail it. The NXT Ricochet, when I first started watching it, I thought was perfectly decent. Now I think I've seen some very good things from him. So that, plus the level of match that we know these two could have. We know that they're not afraid to push the envelope, okay? And in what I could probably say out of all these matches, feels like the biggest blood feud of all of them. I'm expecting this one to steal the show. like properly steal the show. And this is another one, and I like this. Right? It would make sense if either of these men won, and I think this is a real good. Like when people talk about booking and say like AEW's got shit booking, right? Like, okay, what you like in wrestling can vary, and they don't always have the things that gel with me the most. And I think there's been an element of that. People have said that, and people were saying about Ricochet, but I think that's because people were getting worked. And people don't like it when they're being worked. People were seeing all of this great stuff unfold in front of them. This great character work, this great in-ring work, this smart, intelligent storytelling. So I'm going to say who I think will win. I think Ricochet will win. Because of how I think the main event's going to end. Could Swerve win it? Yes. Swerve could win it. But that would only make sense if the opposite to what I think is going to happen in the main event happens. Unless they go down a few different routes as well. But if Swerve wins it, I'm not going to be surprised either. So I'm being really non-committal here, I understand that. But Ricochet is who I think is going to win this match. And I think it's going to be... Look, we've had great matches in AEW for Ricochet. We've had him pinning Will Ospreay in the Continental Classic. We've seen just the evolution of him. The push that he's had again since coming in has been a sustained push that hasn't felt overly produced or just tried to go, here you go, this is him now. So I think they've done it in the right way. And I would love to see him win this match and really cement him at the top of that card. Whew. Now, on to the next match. The Hollywood ending, Mariah May and Toni Storm. When I talk about long-term storytelling and coming back round to things, this is the example of that, okay? So this story has dominated the women's division for so long because we knew we were going to get back round to this match at some point. We didn't know when, but we knew it would be coming. And we obviously had the climax of Act 1 at Wembley Stadium. And that whole story was one of my favourite bits of storytelling in wrestling in a long, long time. I think both of them are fantastic storyteller through how they act. I think they have fantastic chemistry with each other. I think Mariah May is very underrated in a lot of ways. A lot of great comedic timing that I think doesn't get recognised all that often. Toni Storm, I think sometimes doesn't get recognised how good her serious mixed in with comedy is as well. I think they're both really, really great, and I think they shine brightest together. One of my biggest criticisms of Timeless Toni Storm has always been I felt that the in-ring doesn't or hasn't matched the level on the card. Okay. As we got closer to Wembley Stadium, actually, I think that's, for me, that has then improved. And I'm talking about my favourite version of Toni Storm from an in-ring perspective was Social Outcasts, Toni Storm with the two buns in her hair. That look, that feel like just incredible. And I think we're getting back to that. To lead us here, the whole original Toni Storm, I don't know. I didn't see it going the way it did, actually. I did not see her reverting to Timeless so quickly. I thought Rocker Toni Storm was going to go to Australia, have the match, but ultimately lose. Right, that's why it was still going to be a big homecoming match for her. So I didn't see it going the way it did. I thought Mariah May would still have the title right now. But now we're at the Hollywood ending. So this is telling me that this is going to be the end of these two for a while. Whatever happens here, this is your definitive right. Time to separate these guys away. So, in the lead up to here, the in between, Mariah May as champion, I would say good but underwhelming, and not from her fault. Okay, I feel that the stuff she was given in between to work with, and this happens a lot in wrestling with first time champions, that they've had this really great thing and they need something next. And I think the next thing usually is a gimme, right? Let's give you something you can work on here that we know you're going to win. But I think that sometimes we should go the opposite. We should give something that is a lot harder and more difficult that goes, hey, I've had these two. And yes, you're almost giving away your big stuff very early. Very early. But I think for a first timer, giving them big back-to-back wins and stories, and I think that would have been really, really helpful. Like obviously we had Thunder Rosa stuff. I think some Shida stuff in here would have been really great as well. Give us another top-level woman she could have faced off, even if it's for a month. Do these sorts of things that really helped benefit and cement her position. I don't think Mariah is fully cemented at the top of the card yet. I think she should be by now. But I think the follow-up following the Toni Storm feud has not quite been there. I think that when she was given stuff to do, it was very basic stuff. It just felt like really basic, like mean girl kind of stuff. And we've shown that given a bit more latitude, a bit more layered storytelling, we can get some great stuff out of her, and she can tell this story really. And so it's no surprise to me that the best stuff we've seen from her, from promos, from comedy, interlaced with serious wrestling and promos, and all of that is with Toni. All of it has been. I wonder where, again, I say this a lot, I wonder where we're going from here. If we're putting the belt on Mariah, I think that is a good way of cementing her back at the top. But then what are we doing with Toni? And Toni feels like the one for me. What are we doing with her? Is she carrying on in the same manner? Or is the timeless character going to get another bit of a reinvigoration? That I'm not sure about yet. And we've seen the way that the character has been reinvigorated, right? Like it was very clear that the black and white Toni Storm was within almost like within her dream, and now she is the reality. It's really interesting stuff. What does the Hollywood ending mean other than just the ending? I just think it's going to be a big, bombastic, produced match. I think you're going to see big spots. I think you're going to see overt drama, maybe promos in the middle of the match, all that sort of stuff. Like that really big cinematic feel. And we talk about wrestling as cinema. And this is where I talk about the AEW being a bit of a buffet sometimes. That at its core, it's a big work rate promotion that has all these different like buffet, all these different areas of wrestling and likes to dip into. So there's nothing wrong with taking, and I don't mean a cinematic match, I just mean with things being placed in a more drama focused way. My heart says I want Mariah May to win this because I think it will do great things for her at the top of the card. I would love to see Toni Storm win too, because I eventually want to get to that Toni Storm Jamie Hayter match for the title. And for me, that's where this title reign ends if she wins, or should end, is with those two. But my head is telling me that Toni is going to win regardless. Takeshita versus Kenny Omega. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this for a couple of reasons. One, first of all, it's great to have Kenny back. Kenny has been one of the things that's helped draw me back in, because it just doesn't feel like AEW without Kenny Omega. Without the Young Bucks around for a while, that's fine. I love the Young Bucks. Love them. I think they're great. Even with Hangman, when he was missing for a bit, I still wanted him back, and Hangman is one of my most favourite guys in AEW. But it just doesn't feel right without Kenny. And even though I say that Hangman is the main character, so is Kenny. Kenny is that guy, and look, we know the struggles he's been through. So even just to have him back in the ring, incredible, incredible. We've seen Kenny do a lot of side quest stuff, and I like the stuff with the Don Callis family again needs to end. Like the stuff that he was doing with them, and I remember Bike being involved on Kota Ibushi and all of that sort of like my favorite occasions of Kenny in AEW were in a tag team with Hangman and as the belt collector. I just want to see that serious side of Kenny, and I don't want to be wasting around with silly little side quest feuds. I want let's go. Like while we've got Kenny, we don't know how long we've got him for, right? The dude is what 41, 42. He's got or had diverticulitis. We do not know how long we've got this top level of Kenny Omega. I would like to see Kenny Omega versus Ricochet down the line. I think that'd be incredible. Kenny versus Will Ospreay again. I want to see a triple threat. Omega, Ospreay, Okada. Like, these are all the routes I want to go down, things I want to see. I don't want to see, with the greatest respect, Kenny Omega versus Trent. Like, that's not what grabs me. So, we're moving in the right direction here. Takeshita is insane. The guy has the best Blue Thunder Bomb in the business. I think losing this title is where I think this is going. I think losing this title needs to turn him face. And I would almost have him aligned with Kenny. I'd have a respect come out there that, hey, Takeshita now actually, he's seen Don Callis for what he is. Like, I want this to be the implosion of the Don Callis family. I really, really do. Do not want Takeshita aligned with him anymore. Takeshita's work can make him stand up alone, right? It's not going to be enough to put someone right now as the AEW World Champion, right? He's going to need someone who can do a bit more talking for him down the line, I imagine. But in here and now, for the level where we want him, and primarily to allow the in-ring to do the talking, for me to say this is going to be one of the matches of the night, and while I wouldn't be surprised if it was, but for me to not just be able to go match of the night right here, shows you the level and the strength of this card that we've got with AEW. And this is why I'm really excited to get back involved. I'm so excited for this. And end goal, I think, here is Kenny winning the title, and the international title is absorbed by the Continental title down the line. There's just no need for both, right? I would like, or maybe the Continental title is won by Kenny, and that just gets given as a prize to the person who wins the C2 as part of the trophy, but not actually a physically defended title, because that is one of the areas I think we could do a bit better with. But the international title, new champion, Kenny Omega, and yeah, I'm excited for what's coming next after that. And I mean next as in with Kenny, and not next as in the AEW World Championship match. Cope versus Jon Moxley. It's really important for me to kind of preface this by saying how much I love both guys. Right. Adam Copeland is the guy that got me into WWF again when I was like 14, 15, when he came in as Edge right in the beginning. Jon Moxley, I think, has been fantastic. In WWE, I feel that he was really neutered, and they were missing out on a lot there. Here in AEW, he's been fantastic. For whatever reason, well, actually, no, I know some of the reasons, but the Death Riders, which I found a really intriguing concept at the beginning, has just not panned out. And I think it's because we were given all of these little things, like the belt was put in the briefcase. AEW was being torn down, like, because certain things just weren't right. Like the people who now represent it weren't right. But then, like, he then gets announced his matches with Jericho and stuff like that. There's all these kind of things that just make it feel that bit like it's not quite hitting where we thought it would. It was alluded that there was almost some higher power to go alongside this as well. Now, could that have been Shane McMahon? And as a lot of people believed it was going to be, I don't think so, but it felt like there was something more there. It felt like at some point this story was going to kick into another gear and really like require almost like a big, the best way I can describe it is Survivor Series 2001, the 5-on-5 WWF versus WCW, right? That kind of thing. That's what I thought we were getting with this. It's not panned out. I think the match is going to be decent. Who do I think is going to win? So I think we've got two scenarios here. I think we've got a scenario where Cope wins, and after that, Christian tries to use his contract, but Jay White takes that, and then he uses it to become champion. Or Mox wins, and then we move to Swerve facing him, and Swerve taking the title from him. I am going to go out on a limb and say I think the winner of this match is Adam Copeland. But much like the TNT title when he first won it, I don't think he leaves the arena that night as champion. So that was my preview of AEW Revolution. Give us a like, share and subscribe, give us your thoughts, and let me know what you think. And I'll catch you next time.